Hello and good day to everyone. I hope you're doing very well, and welcome to Group Three's presentation. And without further ado, let's start. So, we are going to be, our presentation is about teaching listening, part two, which was teaching listening was started by Group Two, but we will be continuing it for the rest of the information. So, let's open our PowerPoint. Hmm. So, teaching listening, part two. So, without further ado, let's start. So, there will be three parts to this presentation. The first is developing listening activities, the second is using textbook listening activities, and the last one is assessing listening proficiency. Now, I will be starting with developing listening activities. And this part is categorized into four parts. The first one is define the activity's instructional goal and type of response. The second is check the level of difficulty of the listening text. The third is use pre-listening activities to prepare students for what they are going to hear or view. And the last is match while listening activities to the instructional goal, the listening purpose, and students' proficiency level. So to start, we must start with define the activity's instructional goal and type of response. So this is the part where we infer what are the goals that we are going to achieve after listening to activities that require our listening sense. It is going to determine what is the outcome, the expected outcome, when we are using listening materials in teaching. So the first is identification. The students should be able to recognize or determine specific aspects of the message, such as sounds being used in the listening activity, categories of words, the specific words used in the listening activity to make sure that they are being digested, and last is the morphological distinctions. Now what? Now what is morphological distinctions? Now let us Google it because we don't know the meaning. So morphological distinction is this includes aspects of the outward appearance, shape, structure, color, pattern, size, external morphology, or eidonomy, as well as the form and structure of the internal parts like bones and organs, internal morphology. And with regards to listening activities, we can where is it? Okay. We can determine the words being used in the activity. We can how they were formed and how they were used in the context, why they were used in the text, and to make sure that they have a distinct reasoning as to why they were applied to the activity. And the next goal with three um, branches is the orientation, which we hopefully, after the listening activity, we can determine the major facts about a message, such as topic, text type, and setting, because nobody just wants to listen to an activity and not get anything from it. There must be an essence that was gained from the listening activity. So the first is the main idea comprehension. Make sure that the story or the text was understood, the whole gist of um, the material was being digested and being understood by the students. Letter B, detail comprehension, identifying super details. We can infer. This is it goes back to where we discussed last year, where you don't just read because you're reading. You read to gain a deeper understanding, and not just surface level, but underneath, and put it in contextual environments. And lastly, the replication, or producing the message orally or in writing. This is the measure of understanding, where one can repeat the message and translate it in their own words.
Listening is the most important skills in learning. So first, let's define what is listening. Listening is the ability to accurately receive, interpret the message, and give a response in a communication process. According to Go on the year 1999, the most common problem faced by the students in listening in the order of frequency are quickly forgetting, not recognizing the words, and understand the message but not the intended message. That is why we need to ask and answer these questions, and we need to check the level of the difficulty of the listening text. So first, how is the information organized? Simply put, the true information is well organized, so it plays a huge role of the listening context because it gives a good quality to the context and it gives the ability to understand the speaker's message. Second, does the storyline narrative or instruction confirm to familiar expectations? Yes, as a listener, we must have the ability to recall the strings of sequence of an event and expectations of what is usually happen under a certain condition. Third, how familiar are the students with the topic? To teach all students ACE in today's standards, teacher must know the subject matter deeply and flexibly to help the students create a cognitive map, relate one idea to another, and address misconceptions. Teachers need how idea connect across to the field to everyday life. And fourth, does the text contain redundancy? In order for us to determine if there is a redundancy, simply we must identify if there is a repetition of word or idea that does not add anything to the previous usage. It just restates of what have been said. It takes up space and gets in a way without adding meaning. Fifth, does the text involve multiple individuals and objects? So as a listener, we must identify, especially if there's a lot of characters and objects, in order for us to fully understand the whole context. And six, are they clearly differentiated? And lastly, does the text offer visual support to aid in the interpretation of what the listeners hear? So visual aid is a visual support that complements the information provided by a word, and it helps the listener to retain and understand the message.
Good day to each and everyone. My name is Shinami Onasilia, and I will be one of the reporters of Group 3 today. And I want to apologize because I will not be opening my cam as of the moment because I have a terrible stiff neck and it is really hard for me to move my head from side to side. So today's topic is the use of pre-listening activities to prepare students for what they're going to hear or view. So meaning from the term pre-listening activities from the word pre, so before listening activities. So what it's what is its use? So first is to assess students' background of the topic and linguistic content of the text. So through pre-listening activities, you can assess or evaluate the students' background knowledge of the theme or topic you're going to give. It is also important because through this you can know if the student had understood or have an idea of what you're going to do next. And if he or she has the difficulty of comprehending about the topic or theme because he or she does not have any idea about the topic you are about to listen or view. So it is an important factor. Next, the second use of pre-listening activities is to provide students with the background knowledge necessary for their comprehension of the listening passage or activate the existing knowledge that the students possess. So, it through pre-listening activities, you can give the students a relevant activity that could recall the students comprehension about the topic, or it would help them remember on their previous discussions or lessons they have learned before. Third is to clarify any cultural information which may be necessary to comprehend the passage, make students aware of the type of text they will be listening to, the role they will play, and the purposes for which they will be listening. So through pre-listening activities, you could you could give them a glimpse of what you are going to listen, on what is the purpose of listening this passage, story, or um, poem, and how it would relate to the students' role in their lives. Next, it is used to provide opportunities for group or collaborative work and for background reading or class discussion activities. So, through pre-listening activities, you could give students a group activity so that they would interact and socialize with others by sharing their knowledge about the topic or theme they are about to view or listen. All of these uses of pre listening activities could help the students encourage and motivate themselves on what they are going to listen or view in the listening activities. So, here are some examples of pre listening activities. First is looking at pictures, maps, diagrams, or graphs. Through pictures, you could ask the students um, their opinions on what will happen to the story. Next example is reviewing vocabulary or grammatical structures. So, vocabulary are words in the passage or story or in any literature that your students are going to view or listen. So, you could also review them so that they would understand what the word means in the sentence. You could also review the grammatical structures of a sentence and how it is structurized. For example, where is the subject and the predicate, and who are the characters, how to know who are the characters, the setting of the story, something like that. Next example is reading something relevant. So you could read something relevant to the actual listening activity. So it could be a poem that is related to the passage or story you're going to give the students, or it could be um, a picture of the characters, something like that. And as long as it is relevant to the listening activity. Next is constructing semantic webs. Semantic webs is a graphic arrangement of concepts or words showing how they are related. So you can draw a web map where in the middle there is the topic or the theme of the story or poem you are about to listen or view, and then you could ask the students their opinions and um, words that could relate to the topic. What are the words that could relate to the topic? Something like that, or what kind of topics will be connected to the theme or subject. So, next, predicting the content of the listening text. So when you say predicting, so you will ask the students to predict. You will give them an idea, and then they will predict what will happen. So, for example, a boy is walking to home and he did not notice a rock. Because he did not notice a rock, he tripped over the rock. And therefore, you will ask the students, what will happen to the boy since he did not notice the rock on the road? They will answer, oh, he will hurt himself, something like that. So, it is a fun activity that will give excitement to the students. Next example is going over the directions or instructions for the activity. So this is important because you will need to instruct the students on what they're going to do upon listening or viewing the listening activity. So you need to tell them clearly and precisely the instructions are. And if they didn't understand, you need to tell them again. You need to repeat in simple terms so that they would understand. So the next pre-listening activity is doing guided practice. So you could give the students a practice activity related to the topic that you're going to listen or view, and you need to guide them on what to do. Or you could do an oral recitation by answering the questions in the practice activity.
Go back to me. Um, we will be in this part, the fourth part in the first part, the fourth part of the first part. So we will be tackling about match while listening activities to the instructional goal. That's the listening purpose and students' proficiency level. Now, this is the part where we can, these are tips and tricks that we can use to make sure that the students are they're gained to their full potential by only listening. So we can use these tricks, no, not tricks, um, variations to the listening activity to make sure that they are listening well and they get the gist and the understanding of the material that is being listened to. So, number one, if students are to complete a written task during or immediately after listening, allow them to read through it before listening. This is helpful to visual learners because sometimes visual learners have difficulty just listening to the material and they need something to visualize beforehand. And that's why it's best to have them read through the material first and then have the recording play after. And they can have a sense of what is being read and what is being given to them. So number two, keep writing to a minimum during listening. This is helpful because, I find this personally difficult because I tend to take down notes when listening. And if I don't take down notes, I don't understand the material that much. But I get a bit. I mean, I get what I can. But for the betterment and for the determination of the understanding level during a listening activity, it is best to keep writing to a minimum during listening so that the hearing sense can be heightened and be used to the maximum potential. Number three, organize activities so that they guide listeners through the text. This is done beforehand by the teachers, and that while the listeners are going through the text and taking it in by listening, we can organize activities and make sure that they are being prepared. By the end of the activity, by the end of the listening material, we can just go through the flow and just do the activities. Number 4, use questions to focus students' attention on the elements of the text crucial to the comprehension of the whole. This is like when you are starting a module and there are guide questions. They are used to form an idea where we can formulate what can we expect with this learning material. What can we think about during the listening activity, and while listening to the activity, we can just say, oh, so that's why they asked that question. That's why this thing popped up beforehand, so that we can use it in the end, in the middle. And number 5, use predicting to encourage students to monitor their comprehension as they listen. This tactic is used for teachers when to excite learners. As it was taught in last year, teachers are, it's good to put out the material beforehand so that they can, so that students can predict what they can expect, and then they can have a sense of encouragement, and they can they can have something to expect with the material being given beforehand. And next, give immediate feedback whenever possible. Encourage students to examine how or why their response were incorrect. It's best to provide periods of time where students can raise questions so that they can clear their minds and lessen their confusions, so that to your understanding they can be corrected, and then they can be straightened so that they won't be having the wrong mindset while listening, so that it is best to give immediate feedback whenever possible. Next, with the PowerPoint. And next, sample while listening activities. We have multiple activities here. Letter A is listening with visuals. It goes back to the visual learners, where it helps. I mean, it's not enough. It helps having listening to something while looking at something, because some students are just built different and they learn differently than others, and then they can learn better if they have something to look at. Letter B, filling in graphs and charts. This just goes back with visuals. Graphs and charts are helpful in conveying data and information that can be easily digested by the learners. Letter C, following a route on a map. This is helpful when we are following an adventure or a sequence of events that can be traced. It can also be helpful when teaching something about a geography, where we can point out things, and it just goes back to being a visual learner, where we can point out things. This is the part where this is the part is, and that, and so on and so forth. And letter D, checking off items in a list. This is also this can also be helpful when a sequence of events is expected, and like a bingo card, we can just tick off what has been done and we can expect what is to be expected. And letter E, listening for the gist. This is the important part, because as I said before, we don't just listen just for the sake of listening. We don't just read for the sake of reading. We have to gain what is being discussed, what is being conveyed by the message, and we have to take it in and understand it. Letter F, searching for specific clues to meaning. This goes back to the previous point that I made, searching for specific clues. We can use questions to focus students' attention. It's just giving them a guide on what to expect, so that they can have something. They know what to expect, and they can point out that, oh, that's the specific clue that was being given beforehand, and then we can use it now. Letter G, completing close fill-in exercises. This just goes back to the preparing the activities beforehand. just to make sure that they understand what was being provided. A simple exercise like a simple question or a recap or a moment of questioning just to clear up the confusion. And then letter H, distinguishing between formal and informal registers. This can be determined with the morphological um, extension, wherein we have to determine the formal and informal registers, wherein I think it goes with the tone being used, wherein the language, we have to determine the language that is being used as well. So to compare it between the formal and informal registers. And next is a using textbook that is going to be handled by a different reporter.
Integrating listening strategies with textbook, audio, and video. So first, plan for listening or viewing. So it is important to have a plan or a blueprint because listening and viewing aim to help the students reflect their listening or viewing comprehension skills in order to find some strategies that can enhance their ability to communicate effectively. Second, review the tape or video. So it must check in advance in order for the listeners to hear or view it clearly. And third, listen or view intensively section by section. So in this part, it needs to have a thorough inspection in order for the listeners to understand it well. And fourth, monitor your comprehension. So it is a process in which students determine if they understand or not of what they are listening or viewing. If the students cannot articulate the main idea of the passage, so they need to take steps to repair their comprehension skills on before continuing. Fifth, evaluate your listening comprehension progress. So it is a process that critically examine if there is a comprehension progress that can be used to demonstrate the ability to perform an essential academic skill.
Hello again, this is Sheena, and for our last topic for today, we will talk about assessing listening proficiency. From the word assessing, we will evaluate, or in other terms, post listening activities. So, post means after listening activity. So we use post listening activities to check comprehension, evaluate listening skills, and use of listening strategies, and extend the knowledge gained to other contexts. So we use post listening activities in order to evaluate the comprehension or the understanding of the student of the listening activity. So the post listening activity must have a purpose other than assessment. So we do post listening activities not just for the purpose of assessing the extent of understanding or comprehension of the child, but also the moral lessons the student would learn that will be applied in real life situations. It must also require students to demonstrate their level of listening comprehension by completing some task. So, to develop authentic assessment activities, consider the type of response that listening to a particular selection would elicit in a non classroom situation. So, you also consider if the listening activity you are doing with your students is applicable for non classroom environments. For example, you and your students are going to a field trip, and you would instruct your students to listen carefully to her directions to avoid accidents and other unnecessary events. So through that simple task, you would know the student's ability of listening, if he or she really did listen to your instructions.